American accent. Let me first give a little bit of context on my interest in this area. So I run a blog and community called PEVC Tech, focused on how investors in private markets can use AI, tech, and analytics to help generate alpha. And this comes out of my career, both as a serial tech founder, 3 startups, 2 exits. You can do the math on how many failures. And also as a serial VC. I've been a partner at FF Venture Capital and Hall Capital, 2 New York-based VC funds, and we're recently a partner at Coldwater Capital. We are a GP seeder. That means that we invest in emerging VC funds, and we also run an accelerator where we have graduated over 290 funds that have raised over $3 billion and invested in over 8,000 companies. So I'm very interested in investment tech, the tools that investors use to run their business on several levels. One is, I'm a customer, right? So I have to, as I run an investment management firm, I want to make sure that I'm using best-in-class tools. Another level is, I'm an investor in the investment tech space, in companies like Earnest Analytics, Drop Technologies, Adapar, which in different ways are helping investors run their firms. And thirdly, as an allocator into funds, I want to make sure that the funds that I'm working with, that they're well run, that they are using best-in-class tools. It's in my self-interest. I'm well aware that investment alpha is unpredictable. There's a randomness to it. But operational alpha, if you are running a well-run shop, that is more predictable. So I want to encourage all the GPs, the fund managers that I work with, to use modern tools. Let me start with the most amazing statistic I've ever seen in financial research. This is from a study of public markets investors in mutual funds. What's the difference in returns when you invest in a company run by someone you went to school with versus someone you didn't? So the answer is you get a ludicrous 840 basis point higher returns. This is not an Ivy League effect. It doesn't matter what tier of school you went to, but it speaks to the value of unavailable information, right? Insider information in a legal sense, because you went to reunion, you know who's talking about their yacht and who's talking about growing their business further. So if this is true in the public markets, right, the highly liquid, highly transparent public markets, all the more so is it true in the private markets where I operate. So in the public markets, there's obviously been a multi-decade trend towards use of greater data and analytics. Firms like Two Sigma and D. Shaw, they internally look more like a software company than like Warren Buffett going through a 10K with a pencil, which I admit has worked out just fine for Buffett, but still, I think there's a lot of value in a more analytic approach. But in private markets, in general, I think we're behind. And I also think that there's a very different lens. In the public markets, most processes are automated. You want to buy 100 million shares of IBM, you press a button, right? Basically, it's done. In the private markets, everything is manual. There are 11 stages of investing in the private markets, and every one of those stages is manual. And so each one of those stages, there are ways to use technology and analytics to do it more effectively. So I've published a 10,000 word paper on this, and in today's 25-minute presentation, I will summarize it for you. So we're going to go at high speed. I'm gearing it for the TikTok generation, which my kids tell me is what you have to do. So a little bit of color on where to focus. So I find that there's room to use modern AI tech and analytics at every stage of investing, and there's 3 tiers of investors. On the far left are your old school PE, VC funds, and lenders, right? They're using Excel, yay, Salesforce.com, yay, maybe they're using Slack, right? And you would be shocked at the top tier, globe bestriding PE funds I know who don't even have a proper CRM that all the employees adhere to, let alone using all the cool alt data like the vendors that we see today. The next tier are firms that are starting to think in a more sophisticated way about productivity. They're using tools like Airtable and Affinity and so on to try and be a little more thoughtful. And then there's a smaller subset of firms that are actually trying to rethink from first principles how to use data, how to use AI. I predict that the next generation of top performing managers, they're going to look more like the right hand of that curve, right? That's the future. So a huge issue that I've run into internally and externally is how do you actually change the culture, right? How do you, I think the crowd here is very much aware of the importance of modern AI and tech analytics, but some of your colleagues, maybe less so, right? So how do you get them to allocate budget, allocate time and resources, and change their behavior? This is, of course, the subject of a whole semester-long course in psychology, but few quick thoughts. One is role modeling makes a huge difference. I know of one top-tier P fund where some of the senior partners, they keep their contact data on their phones. They say, that's my asset. They don't put it in the CRM. That is definitely not best practice, but because they do it, you can imagine where junior people also are not so good about storing their data in the central data set. And as you can imagine, these are often firms where sourcing is more about relationships as opposed to data. Another is, of course, budget, right? Having an explicit budget for what you're going to do to upgrade the firm. And I also recommend explicit comp tied to use of these tools. So for example, a big issue that I've run into is CRM, getting people to input data in the CRM. And I would suggest, tell people, especially the junior folks on the sourcing side, look, if I don't see that you're tracking meetings in CRM, I assume you didn't have meetings. What did you do? Like, are we gonna pay you for doing nothing? No. So you wanna make it very clear that this is in the firm interest to store the data in some central place. And there are consequences if you don't do that. Another recommendation is make sure that there's a direct ROI for the individual. The common dynamic I see is you tell people to store the data in the CRM or use this cool tool, and they don't have a personal incentive to do it, right? It's just more labor for them, secretarial labor to enter the data. But if they say, oh, this improves my personal productivity, I'm using this tool that filters through the universe of private companies and identifies the ones that are most relevant for me, and I can see that in my metrics, right, that I source companies that have a higher propensity to get to an initial meeting and get to DD and get to close, right, then they start to pay more attention to that great vendor that you just spent some money on. So let's briefly go through these different tiers. AI is, of course, the theme through all of these. I have a case study in my blog about how Tiferes, which is a Brooklyn-based VC firm, uses AI. And their operating framework was modern generative AI is applicable to almost any process. And in any firm, there are many, many different processes, and every individual within the firm, from the admin to the CIO to the CEO, right, they each run different processes. I am not an expert on the admin's processes, right? He, the admin, he's the expert. So what you need to do is, and what they did at Tiferes, they had an internal workshop on the basics of generative AI, right? And they told everyone in the firm, from most junior to senior, set up your own mini model, right? Convert one of the processes you're responsible for using these AI tools and experiment with it. Because the thought was, this way, we want everyone to use these tools. We want everyone to be more efficient, and we want people to be aware your job will not be taken by an AI, but your job will be taken by someone who uses AI better than you do, right? So you want to train everyone so they're not scared of these tools and they're rethinking how to use these options. So first step of building your investment management firm is you actually have to manage it, right? This is harder than you would think. I find the typical DNA of people running investment management firms is they're deal people, right? Maybe they're ex-bankers, or they've been investors their whole life, but they don't necessarily think about culture and HR and process improvement and the sort of things that MBAs and strategy consultants think about. So I would first recommend using some of the standard tools for managing organizations, which in my world, the Tech Start Plan includes firms like Asana and Monday and Basecamp. It doesn't really matter which tool, but have a tool, because many firms don't even have a tool, right? It's just running off of a shared Google Doc and some emails back and forth. Another tool that I like is Maestro. Maestro is a tool for private equity funds to manage their portfolio companies. Think of it like Asana for CEOs. So you can use it to track the KPIs that you've told the CEOs about. And also there's a set of tools in it for how do you accomplish those KPIs. So maybe one of it is move more of our data spend to the cloud, right, as opposed to on-prem. So there are, of course, many consultants out there who are happy to help you do it. Maestro has in-house PDFs within the platform that tie to each particular KPI. And so I said to the CEO, wait, I got an MBA, didn't I learn about how to do all this stuff? Like, why do I need these PDFs? He said, well, it's chunked learning, right? It's micro-chunked for the given KPI you have for that particular CEO, whatever that may be. So next is marketing for the firm. So social media is certainly broadly used in VC land, less so in private equity and in lender land. A common question I get about social media is, how do you have time to generate the content? I'll tell you my model, which is recycle, not just products and physical goods, But I find in the course of my work, I have to write memos, I have to write analyses, I have to write a lot of emails to CEOs, and I tend to write the same emails over and over to CEOs. And so those get converted into blog posts and essays, and then I can just point people to links. So I recommend thinking about what content you're generating in your job, where you could sanitize it, take out the confidential info, and convert it into a blog post, into something that's helpful. In particular, in a generative AI world, I focus on things that ChatGPT does not have access to, right? Such as summary of data from all of your client installations or whatever business you're in, right? Because that allows you to write insights that are not available to the broader world and to your AI SEO competitors. Another company in the space I'm an investor in is Contently on Social Native. These are two different companies that help generate on-brand content for different clients. So one of the clients for Social Native was Coca-Cola. They had a Coke on the Beach campaign. The imagery for Coke on the Beach is very different in Brazil than Saudi. So they were able to generate the right videos, the right images that are on brand and culturally appropriate for those different environments. So their investors use these type of tools to enhance their own brand in appropriate ways without having to build their own in-house team to generate cool TikTok dance videos. Another interesting company in space is Influitive. So Influitive tracks your advocate network, meaning not just your employees, but your employees' spouses, families, your clients, and motivates them to help the firm. So for example, recruiting great engineers, a very common pain point. It sets up mechanisms that you can encourage the people around you to do that. One of the clients is Common Angels. That's a new Boston-based angel network, and they're using it to encourage the angels in their group to source deals, to run events for their other members, other sorts of activities that are beneficial for the organization as a whole. Most organizations focus on just their employees. You pay them to do stuff, but there's a broader network of people around you whom, with appropriate incentives, can do things to help your organization. Another hot issue is monitoring social media for origination. So, for example, are people talking online about alternative data? Gee, I'm a VC investing in alternative data, maybe I should hop into that conversation. So the number of tools that are helpful here, for example, mentioned. By the way, this whole presentation is available on my website and a longer version, so no need to take photos. You can check it out there. I will give the link at the end. Next is fundraising. So one of the reasons I like social media is it turns cold calls into warm calls. This is in honor of our United Kingdom friends. I had a photo of a very cold call. So I've listed here some of the companies that are online communities for LPs and GPs to meet. Right, the traditional fundraising process is sort of ludicrously manual, right? You go to conferences and you hope to meet someone who has money or an allocator and you hope to win their favor. It's kind of like dating, pre-internet dating. Any technology that can find me a wife is a killer app, so I met my wife online, so I'm a fan. So there is a business equivalent of that, which are some of the companies I mentioned here, where you can go online and search for the LPs who fit your particular model, right, that are likely to give you capital. Another tool in the space is Voray. It's a New York-based company that organizes super curated events. So you want to have a dinner with just principals and above at PE funds with 500 mil AUM and above, right? They'll organize a dinner with a dozen people who fit that tier. And they have an automated platform behind it. And the sales pitch is, this is a more efficient way to source than going to a conference where there are 500 people, most of whom are probably not relevant to your particular goal. So another issue that comes up is you would like to think people are reading your collateral on a big screen monitor and thoughtfully perusing it. They're actually on the toilet, so on their phone. So there are a number of tools like Quiller that take your super cool PDF collateral and make it readable, right? Big font, not too much text on the page, for the typical reader. And I recommend using these tools when you're marketing at scale. Another big issue is tracking who has new capital to deploy to your amazing fund. So I certainly recommend using MandateWire and other tools that monitor new allocations. So next is origination, an area where alternative data is particularly top of mind. So there are obviously many, many companies, so many that are whole firms like Yield Alpha that will help guide you to which one you should use, that aspire to be the Bloomberg of private companies. And so there's obviously a lot of value in these. One of the questions that I ask as an allocator is, great, you're using Traxon or one of these other vendors, so do your competitors, right? What are you doing that's distinct? So I would recommend have a cogent answer to that question. So one new approach approach I like is firms like Otto, which are using generative AI for deal sourcing. They're sending emails at scale to targets saying, hi, you're CEO of a mid-market ball bearings company in Ohio. We're with a PE fund and we're interested in buying companies like yours. Would you like to have a conversation? So some of you have probably gotten generative AI sales pitches of this type. I realize it can be annoying, but that said, this is, for better or worse, the future of sales. So they find much more cost effective than the traditional model of hiring a bunch of cold callers. Another tool in the space is Equity B. So Equity B allows you, some of you I'll bet are employees of tech startups, and you have illiquid options, and maybe you don't have the capital, the extra $500K to go exercise your options. So Equity B gives you the capital to do that. You can exercise your options in a synthetic manner. You get the cash benefit of it, and they take the other side of that trade. So there are some later stage VC funds that are using this for origination purposes because it lets them get toehold positions in private companies that are maybe Series B and not yet Series C. Another pattern I see in best practices here is figuring out the right media to engage with people. The academic research in this shows that the more types of media that you use to engage with someone, the more they trust you, the more they want to do business with you. So imagine you meet someone at a conference, you shake hands, right? You follow up with an email, get to know them better, maybe use WhatsApp with them. So people have different preferred mediums, right? Like if you're in China, reach out is going to be a lot more used than here in the US. And so you have to be multilingual in those different platforms, which is a lot easier than learning Chinese. And so I recommend have different touch points on those different platforms so that you're accessible to people, whatever their preferred communications medium is. Another set of data communities are the data communities for GPs, meaning direct investors in tech companies. So I recommend reaching out to the co-investors who are most likely to fit, to be congruent with your thesis, because those are the people you should be co-investing with, sharing deals with. Again, this typically happens in an ad hoc manner, right? You went to business school with someone, you say, oh, you're investing in healthcare, so am I. But that's really not best practice. Best practice is you figure out, okay, who are the 10 most active healthcare investors in the Northeast, right? And make sure you get to know those people and have ongoing relationships with them if that's your space. Particularly during COVID, right, but even pre-COVID, there's a boom in online communities that are gated, right? The ungated communities, including social media more broadly, right, the X's of the world, right, they've declined in value because there's so many fake AI, quote-unquote, people, right, and so much noise there. So I think more of the action in online communities is going to gated communities. By analogy, here in New York, you certainly see this phenomenon of more and more gated clubs, right, where you pay some significant amount of money, basically, to say you paid a lot of money to go to some private club and go to a restaurant that other people can't go to. So the online version of that is there are all sorts of gated LinkedIn groups and Slack groups and so on. I wrote a post on this on how to find the right online communities for your particular model. I certainly recommend figuring that out and be active in those communities, and you may find that's more time efficient than the traditional model of meeting people just ad hoc. Another set of tools are the online communities with reviews of different companies. I find these very helpful for origination for both identifying companies that are getting well reviewed, right? Maybe I should reach out to them because that's a growing vendor, but also DD, right? What are the clients actually saying about that particular company? A great example of creative use of these tools is one of my old portfolio companies, Interaxon. Interaxon out of Toronto makes a brain sensing headset. It's used for meditation, ADHD, PTSD, and other brain challenges. When they initially came to us, they didn't have a product, and we said, okay, can you validate people actually pay for a brain sensing headset? And we told them, right, you run a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo, another portfolio company. This is how VC works. We encourage the companies to give money to one another. And Indiegogo is a crowdfunding platform where you can say, I've got this cool idea for a product, haven't built it yet, give me money, and maybe I'll ship it to you. And they got $300K of cash from people who said, cool product, I know you haven't actually built it, but if you build it, send me it, right? And we said, okay, that's $300K cash, non-dilutive cash, and it's $300K of very clear interest. People will buy this product if you can actually make it. So that helped validate for us and helped justify for us making an investment into this company. So identifying what are the growing patterns where people are spending money on these tools is a great way to see the frontier edge of new technologies. Another example of creative use of non-traditional data is Hamilton Robinson. So it's a PE fund which sourced a deal via the Darden job board. They posted an ad saying, "Are you looking for cash to buy out your employer?" That ad got forwarded to a guy named Mark Reiser, not even a Darden grad, but a friend of someone who went to Darden, and he got in touch and he ended up buying out his employer who was retiring. So you don't normally think of job boards as a place you source PE deals, but that's exactly what they did. And that's where your competitors are not. So another analytical tool that I think is really creative is SPS. They're owned by With Intelligence, formerly owned by Bain. So this is a tool for deal sourcing. They work by analyzing the universe of investment bankers. Which bankers, like obviously everyone knows, right, the bulge bracket, but there are thousands and thousands of small bankers out there who do 2 deals a year, right? But if they're the leading specialist in medical devices in Chicago, and that's your space, you should know that banker. So they track all that deal activity to help inform which banks, which players, and which ecosystem you should be spending time with. Next is DD. So a big issue in DD is in the first stage of origination, right, you don't have access usually to the financials. You're just relying on the publicly available data. Once you're at the DD stage, you do. So then there's a question, okay, what do the financials correlate with? Do they correlate with web traffic? Do they correlate with other data sets that are used? If they do, that will hopefully inform future monitoring of it, and it will give me more insight into their past, into their history. So I'm an investor in Drop, another Toronto company, which has detailed, fully transparently opted in, I should say, data about credit and debit card activity for millions of US, Canadian, and other consumers. So they have clients who are using it to track in real-time spending. For example, at my old firm, we're an investor in Plated, the meal kit company, and we used this tool to analyze the drop-off rate of Blue Apron versus Plated versus HelloFresh. Because this was a new category at the time, this was the only way we could get this data, right, was from the actual credit card data. Another tool I've seen, the VC firms that have been around a while and have a big data set of past decks from thousands of companies. Some of them are building their own in-house LLMs to surface data from that. There's actually a lot of really, really valuable intel that's unavailable through other means in these decks, the competitive landscapes, right, the metrics about each individual startup. And that's a way of surfacing that, not just relying on memory. Another company I'm an investor in is Ask Wonder. So Wonder provides desk research to clients. Typical white-collar workers spending an hour a day looking for stuff online, and we think maybe that's not the best use of your time. So they have a network of US-based researchers who will do things like look up who are the top competitors to X, right? What's the market size of Y? And they find that saves clients significant time. One of their clients is McKinsey. I said, wait, McKinsey hasn't solved this problem, but that's what they tell me. So biography analysis software tools are valuable for filtering for the CEOs in your industry who are most likely to respond to you because maybe you have a common school or you immigrated from the same country, or you have some other point of affiliation. So next is negotiation. A dynamic I see a lot is people using AI to write the first draft of the investment memo. Companies like Wokelo, W-O-K-E-L-O, provide this in a more automated way and with lower error rates than just doing it with the public AI models. Sorry about my audio quality here. Bullet Point Network is a company here in New York which facilitates Monte Carlo analysis for financial modeling. Typically, back when I was an investment banker, I put together a spreadsheet and I do a few sensitivities. Bullet Point Network allows you to do a lot of sensitivities across all the different variables that might impact your investment, and then track that over time. So a year from now, how accurate was our analysis? Thank you. Testing. Okay, hopefully better. So another dynamic I see to use these tools to enhance your negotiation is typical dynamic when you're negotiating with founders. They're not familiar with the investment process. You as a professional investor, you are. And so they're often a little intimidated, right? Obviously, they'll often hire a banker to help them, but still, right? The more transparent you can be with them, the better a dialogue you will have. And so Venture Dealer is an open source tool that allows you to graphically display the implications of different deal structures. And that can help to build trust with your counterparty. GF Data is a really interesting company which has, to my knowledge, the best data set of transaction multiples on mid-market private equity transactions. They do it through a data co-op model. They're acquired by ACG. And that's a great way to inform your negotiation process. Next is monitoring. Totem, we spun out of my old VC firm. This is a firm that tracks the cap tables of your companies, your portfolio companies. So I'm going to a meeting with Sequoia. I can just look at my phone. Okay, which companies am I a co-investor with on Sequoia, right? At what level? What are the dynamics in each company? Because that will inform what we're going to be talking about. Another tool in the space, Earnest Analytics. I mentioned I'm an investor. They have quite a few data sets, one of which is a web pricing data set. And that's helpful in assessing, because it's something often the board, the CEO won't tell you, right? It's how their pricing is varying. They may not be fully transparent. So this is a way of making sure that you're aware of, are they cutting pricing in order to impact their other parts of their business. It's always helpful to have some second source of truth of what the CEO is telling you. So next is acceleration. So one tool that I found helpful is I find there are certain tropes in the questions that I get from CEOs. I mentioned I've converted a lot of those into blog posts. I ended up creating my own AI avatar for this purpose. And I recommend thinking about what you can automate in your engagement with your portfolio companies, both in order to speed it up, right? So it's one less burden for you. And also, it's definitely on brand if you're a tech investor to be using these tools. Another tool in space, and I'll just wrap up in a minute, is Getro. So Getro leverages your fund's overall network for recruiting. Typical dynamic in VC, right? The company doesn't have a brand because they're very small, no one's heard of them, right? You as a VC hopefully have a better brand. So Getro allows you to facilitate that to speed up the hiring process and enhance your value add. And then lastly is exit, right? So the number of tools that are trying to create marketplaces to find the right buyer for your portfolios. A hot issue now, given current liquidity constraints in our space. So you can get the slide deck at that link. I will be around all day. I think we have time for maybe one question, but happy to talk privately with anyone who wants to dig further in this space. I know I threw a lot of companies at you. The message I want to leave you with, this is the future, right? The old way was manual, it was relationship driven, it was more ad hoc. The future is using these tools to build your firm, to get more scale, and that's what the best-in-class firms are going to be doing. So if you're not doing that, then you will probably not be successful as you should be. Any questions? Yes?
So let's say that you're a VC company and you came here for the first time and you said, I'm all in. There's 11 steps. I want to go get a subscription to every one of the services that you said for all 11. What would be the total subscription, all-in cost? You'll get all 11 with just one spot. How expensive would this be to put in your organization?
Okay, so that's definitely not what I would recommend because it'll be complete nightmare to implement, right? So there's a hierarchy of what a Pareto analysis of what is most impactful first, and that obviously depends on your particular institution. And the price obviously varies depending on how big your institution is and where you decide to prioritize. So I find typically the low-hanging fruit, if you're talking about the modal firm that has only the basics of Excel and maybe a CRM that some employees use, right? So the low-hanging fruit is first the CRM and getting everyone to use it and making sure all the data is there, right? Typically there are many data silos of someone's phone and some Excel file with a list of LPs, right? And some conference listing of who spoke at a conference, who might be an allocator, and right? So just pulling all that data in, that can be very impactful and generate value if you're the person spearheading this new initiative. So second is figuring out, sourcing is usually where you'll find the greatest application in all data as a first cut, right? So figuring out, okay, what are the right tools, and will help you with this, to identify the companies that fit your particular investment thesis. Do you want to go for the data, the company vendors, right? Like I mentioned, the CB Insights of the world and Traxon, they're in the business of tracking companies. Or the all-data companies like Earnest Analytics that are not tracking companies per se, right? They're tracking transaction data, and they pull out of it data about companies, right? It's a different mindset. So that's something that's situational. So as with most change management, if you try and do it too abruptly, you end up with a lot of challenges, and there's some easing in that I think is helpful. Okay, I think we are at time, but I'd love to speak one-on-one with anyone who's interested in the topic and as passionate as I am. Thank you very much.